Follow us on YouTube. Search Think Tenacity. Follow us on social media by searching Think Tenacity.
You run your private practice for many years now. If you could have an extra hour a day for self-care, what would you do?
Follow us on YouTube.
I would probably rest more because I do quite a lot. So I probably would rest. I'd put music on and just listen to it and just rest. Turn off my phone as well. Turn off my phone so there's no disturbances and just sit and listen to the music and shut my eyes and just lie down and just, just rest for a little bit. Yeah. I would probably rest more.
Follow us on YouTube. Search Think Tenacity. Follow us on social media by searching Think Tenacity.
Anxiety and depression is really common within the Black community. What self-care tips would you give for anxiety?
If you're able to go for a walk and be somewhere where you're just alone with yourself and alone with your thoughts in a different environment, not in an environment where you are all day, especially if you're working from home. Take yourself out of that environment, go somewhere, walk around the park or go somewhere. And sometimes I'd say go without music, sometimes go with music, depending on, how you're feeling. But sometimes one is needed, sometimes it's not needed. So music or no music, depending on what works for you.
Follow us on YouTube. Search Think Tenacity. Follow us on social media by searching Think Tenacity.
It's all of it. It's the being in nature, it's listening to music, it's being with my children, it's listening to comedies, laughing, it's getting massages, it's whatever it is. I love someone said whatever my body's calling for. So part of it is just honoring my body enough to give it the space to pause and ask it that question, and then to have the compassion, the obedience to it, to follow whatever it's leading me to give itself in that moment. So it's a range of things. I love live music. I like dancing. I like all the stuff. Sometimes it's sitting and writing. Sometimes it's reflecting. Sometimes it's crying. Sometimes it's going for a drive. But the most important part is that it's important enough to me that I create space for it, even if it's just sitting still in silence. So
absolutely, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was great
and representing Chicago.
Go for a walk or sit outside or sit by a pond or a lake or something that can do wonders for your mental health. Also having a list of things or hobbies that you enjoy that maybe you can go to. So there are different dimensions of self-care. A pedicure, manicure, or a haircut or going to the hairdresser isn't always going to fix it. But sometimes there can be physical self-care that you need, emotional self-care, intellectual self-care, even environmental self-care where you just need to declutter your closet or rearrange your room or your home office or something. So it really depends on maybe what your body is saying that it needs. Maybe it's church, maybe you need a good conversation with a friend. So I think kind of being in tune, understanding if it's something that you just need a little bit of me time to resolve, then go ahead and, go into your toolbox. If it's music, if it's your favorite food, right?
Follow us on YouTube. Search Think Tenacity. Follow us on social media by searching Think Tenacity.
Hello. Welcome. I'm Clayton M. Koch, creator and host of the Cashflow Show podcast. I'm here to talk about mental health charity Think Tenacity in promoting better quality mental health for people in the Black community. Now, I cannot stress enough the importance of this work and how much it means to the community, for the Black community to have access to therapists who are socially and culturally aware of the mental health challenges faced by members of our community. Think Tenacity is working to address those challenges by providing well-needed therapy services in an affordable and cost-effective way. Sadly, the provision of these services takes time and money, and any support you can lend would be greatly appreciated. So join me in supporting Think Tenacity on their journey to remove the stigma and to give our community better mental health. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. Welcome to Making Time for Black Mental Health events for Black self-care. So I guess it says what's on the tin, Black self-care. So today we are joined by a wonderful panel, Sabrina and C. And together we are going to learn exactly what is self-care and to actually share as a community our self-care stories. We are making time for Black mental health events set up to serve the Black community. We are non-profit, which means our events like this, our workshops are totally free. This event has been funded by Greenwich Mental Health Hub, Oxley NHS, and South East Mind. If you'd like more information about this event, you can visit our social media channels. And today we've got some wonderful event moderators. So we'll just drop those links in the chat that are our YouTube and our social media. This event is being streamed live via YouTube. So after this event, if you want to go back and have a replay, you can go back anytime of your choice, 24 hours a day. So before we start, I'd like to just introduce our panel today. So Sabrina, would you like to say hello and welcome?
Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina. I'm a woman of many talents, social worker, disability advocate. Hi.
Wonderful. C, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, so I'm C, and I'm really excited to be here to share a bit about self-care. And thank you for having me here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So guys, before we get started, this event is all about you. We are running this platform today, so you make time for your self-care. So everybody here today will receive a free self-care card. So I'll get my moderators to drop that in the chat. And the self-care card is really simple and easy for you to use. We will ask you, what is your favorite self-care activity? For example, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite song by an artist or a music that you really love? And then what we'll do is we will actually send that back to you after the event. So our event moderators will drop that in the chat. What is your favorite self-care? So that will be dropped in the chat right now. And if you're wondering what that looks like, if Sabrina doesn't mind, I will share her self-care card on the screen. Is that all right with you, Sabrina?
Yeah, that's fine.
Absolutely. Okay, so we will share her self-care card on the screen. So you'll receive a self-care card that looks something like this, that will have your name, and your favorite food, your favorite song, and your favorite movie. Wonderful. Okay, guys, thanks so much for that. So that's in the chat. Before we begin, as a community, it's really, really important for us to find out what type of support do you need, what type of event you might be interested in. So what I would ask the event moderators to do is we are scoping out Black mental health support for bipolar. So in the chat, the moderators will link our upcoming survey around bipolar support for the Black community. So that will be dropped in the chat now. If you can just take 2 minutes to complete that Black mental health survey, that will be amazing. Thank you. I'll give you a few moments. I'll give you a few moments for that. That's amazing. So at Think Tenacity, we really care about wellness and safeguarding, and your safeguarding comes first. So we will have a questionnaire that will, at the beginning and at the end of this event. So I'd ask the moderators to drop in the link our wellness questionnaire survey, if you could fill that in, so we can find out how you feel before the self-care and then how we can monitor it for you after the self-care event has finished. So the moderators will drop that in the link. Wonderful. I'll give you a few moments to complete that. Okay, that's great. Wonderful. Thanks, guys, for filling that in. So, guys, we want to hear from you in the chat. We've got moderators. So in the chat, do you want to drop a hello? Would love to hear from you. Where are you from in the chat? So do you want to just drop in the chat where you're from? Are you from London or outside of London? What borough are you from? So guys, feel free to use the chat and say hi to everyone, and our moderators will be monitoring that chat. Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, so I will bring Sabrina to the stage, and we will have a spotlight with Sabrina to discover what she likes to do for self-care. So wonderful. So Sabrina, what part of London do you live?
So I live in Southeast London. So I'm a Southeast Londoner, true and true. But when I'm not in Southeast London, I'm in Grenada. So it's a mixture.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay, we do love that. That's wonderful. So please tell us, what's your job role?
So I'm a woman of many titles and many job roles. One of my main job roles that I've been doing for the last 4 years is I'm a consultant social worker supporting students on a compressed social work program called the Think Ahead program. And that's supporting mental health social workers to make sure that their practice is the way that we need it, the way that we need support, and they're looking at people as a whole rather than just as their illness. I'm also the founder of Stubbs Disability Service, CIC. We predominantly support people from Black and ethnic minority communities, but we support everyone, and it's more about advocacy, information and advice, PIP application forms. It's just kind of raising awareness of disability, because it's often something that people like to hide and it's quite marginalized. And then the third role that I'll tell you about is I'm also going to be a mental health facilitator for Think Tenacity. So that means we're going to be creating that safe space for you to talk about your conditions, your ailments, give you information and advice, and just know that we've got you and we understand. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sabrina. So if you wouldn't mind, would you share what is your disability with the audience, please?
Yeah, so I am someone that has dual physical disability diagnosis. My first condition is called spina bifida. I was diagnosed with this when I was about 10 years old. It means different things for different people, but what it means for me is that I have curvature of the spine and I walk with a limp. One leg is shorter than the other, and I have a degree of muscle wastage and weakness. And as most conditions, they always give you a second one just to make it exciting. You've got to have more to add to the parcel. So I also have another condition, autoimmune condition called CIDP for short. The long version is chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. What all that means is that, similar to MS, where the central nerves are affected, for me, the peripheral nerves are affected. And the combination of my conditions is degenerative physical disability. So what I was like as a teen versus now is very different. So it's forever changing and is always keeping me on my toes. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. So how does your disability affect your mental health?
I think that's a good question, because a lot of people always think it's automatic that if you have a physical disability, that you must have a mental health condition. It's not. But for me, what I found is disability itself, especially when you've got a degenerative disability, you go through almost like a grief process. So some people may have heard of something called, they call it Kubler-Ross, where he talks about the stages of grief. But I think when it comes to chronic disability, it's something slightly different. So there's somebody called Snyder, and he talks about when you think about grief and loss, it's more about thinking about what's lost, what's left, and what's possible. And that's what causes that grief. So it's not the loss of somebody, it's more the loss of self and the loss of identity. What I found for me is that stage between what's left and what's possible is where my periods or bouts of depression may happen. So it varies from year to year. But once I figured out what's next and the new version of me, or being able to change that or reframe what it is, I'm able to overcome those symptoms of depression. But it's ongoing. I feel because my condition is always declining, I have steady different phases of depression that happens, because you're always trying to reevaluate your sense of self. So I think that for me is how my physical disability affects my mental health, that you're always trying to figure out, who am I? What can I do? What's the new version of me? And trying to be, I guess, as people with disability, we always want to be people of purpose, and that purpose can change. And our interpretation of purpose, to me, is what can cause the low moods and the depression.
Thank you so much for sharing and being open and vulnerable. So let me ask you, for the audience, how would you define what is self-care? Because we hear it, we see the hashtag every 5 minutes. Exactly what is self-care? How would you define it in your own words?
For me, self-care is a doing word. You know, when you're back in school and you're talking about your verbs. Self-care is a doing word. It's what we're going to do to make sure that we are well or create some form of balance. That means that it can vary. And even though I call it a doing well, sometimes it's actually not doing. Sometimes for me, self-care is that act of deciding I'm not going to do that thing, or I'm going to put those boundaries in place to kind of help you. So it's whatever we do, because it's different depending on the person. No one could tell you that, oh, you must do this for self-care and it's going to work. It's literally an individual thing. So it's whatever you're going to do to make sure that you're well, that you're balanced, and that life feels the way that you need it to feel. For me, that's what self-care is. So it varies. So it's not a straightforward answer, I'm sorry, but it varies.
No, I think self-care is one of those words or a question. What is electricity? What really is electricity? None of us really know. We just know it lights the house, and if it goes, we're in trouble. Do you know what I mean? So it's nice to hear what self-care means for different people. And I love the way you said it's individual. And I sometimes believe self-care shouldn't be compared, because you might hear somebody run a marathon or they read 3 books in a month, and we're all different. So thank you so much for sharing that. Why do you think in our community, some Black people struggle understanding self-care and might make more time for their friends and family rather than time for themselves? Why do you think?
I think that one's a hard one. I don't proclaim to know the answer for every Black person that's out there. But I think if I was speaking for people from, I guess, the Caribbean community, I feel a lot of how we are raised, it's about community. It's about thinking about the next person. So for example, in Grenada, we talk about one nation, one people. Jamaicans talk about out of many, one people. There's always that concept that if we think about the multitude or the community, by doing that, we are thinking about ourselves. So I think we're kind of inbuilt to think about the community first, because if you look after the community then is supposed to look after you. But I also feel it can also be that we're caught in a, I guess, trauma or survival state, that we don't have time to think about ourselves. So it's constant, well, I've got to do this and I've got to do this to survive. So I don't have time to think about the individual things for well-being or self-care. And I think for the different generations, that meaning has changed. So I think my father or grandfather's generation, they would not really understand self-care the way that we talk about it. It's just doing what you've got to do to live and survive and function and taking care of your family. For them, that's self-care. For us, it's about, have you taken a pamper, or have you done your nails, or have you gone counseling? That's a new concept to them. So I kind of feel it's that community mentality that's good, but also has its negative when we forget to think about ourselves. Only when things go bad do we remember that we have to look after ourselves first before we can look after others. So yeah.
Yes, that's so true. And it's so important that we have these type of conversations, because it reduces stigma and allows a safe platform for us to explore, like, how can we overcome these challenges? For yourself, what is your favorite self-care activity? How do you look after your mental health?
Oh, that's a hard one, because I had to put hands up. I've been very bad at doing that of late. But one of my favorite things, or the things that I think I do even consciously or unconsciously, is take inventory. So it's about every morning or every week or every month, sit down, figure out, what do I need for myself this week, today? How am I feeling? Whether it's aches, pains, or whether it's emotionally, where am I at? What do I need? Because I feel like what we need changes daily, but if we don't take time to figure out what it is and what's going on, then we can't actually action it. We can't do anything to make sure that it's reduced. So for me, it's inventory, taking inventory. And that could be just me sitting and thinking. It can be me journaling. It can be me deciding to do a random activity that's to do with well-being. Whatever it is about kind of figuring out, how is Sabrina today? How is she feeling today? What does she need today? And that can be, sometimes I need a conversation with somebody, or I need to rant and go crazy in the house, or I need to blast music, or I need to go to some kind of reggae concert. It's just about figuring out what do I need that helps me? One of my go-to those is always nature. I think anything whether it's putting on rain sounds on the TV or finding some piece of nature, if it has a way of calming me. So yeah, inventory, nature, and just figuring out what does Sabrina need for her body, mind, and soul today. That's what I do.
Yeah, I love that. And I like that you said nature, because often when we hear self-care, we think, oh, it's got to be expensive. Oh, I've got to save up for it. Or you're looking at the other person, they've just had a shopping spree. Whereas nature, you could just go for a walk. You could watch the birds. You could go by the river, you know. So I'm glad that you mentioned things that don't cost money, you know, and doesn't maybe take a lot of planning as well. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank
If
you.
there's one thing you'd like to share with the audience who don't know where to start or they're nervous, what might be the one thing you might motivate, or for somebody who's never started self-care before?
I think self-care can be that simple. It can be just simply asking yourself, how am I? Literally, to me, that's the first point in self-care, to just take that moment to figure out, how am I? That's all you need to ask. Something you don't even need to know the answer. You might just need to just ask yourself that a few times during the week, and slowly the answer will come to you. I think that's the first start, trying to figure out how are you, and then figure out what do I need. So I think that to me is the easiest step. You don't need to do nothing major. Just ask yourself.
Well, I think that's a wonderful way to end your spotlight session. So thank you very much for sharing your self-care. And I really think that's going to inspire the audience tremendously. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for letting me share. Thanks.
So guys, you are tuned in to Black Self-Care for Making Time for Black Mental Health events. So guys, this is a funded event workshop. So we love to find out your own feedback, and most importantly, like, where are you from throughout London. So we do have a few Zoom polls, if that's okay with you, before we meet with C. So if you wouldn't mind, we will do our next poll. So our event host will bring up the next poll for the borough. So our event host. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so our event poll is bringing up the poll for where are you joining us from. So if you click where are you joining us from, and it includes the panelists as well. So if you can click on where are you joining us from, the poll will last for the next 40 seconds. So if you could kindly share where you're joining us from, that would be amazing. Thank you. Where are you joining us from? What part of London? Yep, I'll give you a few more seconds to fill that in. Okay, that's amazing. So thank you guys for completing that poll. That's super. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so on the spotlight, I would like to bring in C on the spotlight for her. Wonderful. So thanks, C, very much for joining us. So I understand you're currently studying your master's. If you'd like to introduce yourself and what area of London or UK are you from?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So my name is C, and I am currently studying my master's in integrative counseling and psychotherapy. I know that's quite a mouthful, so counseling masters is simpler and easier to just say. But essentially, yes, I'm close to completing and close to qualifying. And it's been a long 3 years, but I'm almost there. And I am currently residing in Birmingham, but I was studying in London, but I'm currently residing in Birmingham now.
Wonderful, wonderful. So for the audience who might be interested in going into the sector of therapy or counseling, so you're currently doing your master's, and before that was your undergrad. So when you finished your degree, does that give you a qualification to be, what does that give you a qualification to be at degree level?
So my undergrad was in psychology, but after my psychology undergraduate degree, I decided that I wanted to specialize in counseling. So that's why I went on to do my counseling master's degree. So it is possible to also just do a 3-year counseling degree and not have to do a master's degree. And a counseling degree would also allow somebody to work and practice as a counselor in the UK as well. But yeah, there's lots of different routes to becoming a counselor in the UK, but this is the path that I took.
And when you complete your master's in counselling, would it be that you specialize in a specialist type of remit of counselling or grief, depression? How does it work when you've qualified in terms of, is it a specific area of counselling you'd work in?
So depending on the kind of degree or master's that you do, it could be specialized, but mine is not specialized. So I can help people with any issues at the moment. However, of course, as with many jobs, there's always like extra training that you can do to gain extra knowledge about certain things. So if I wanted to become more knowledgeable about trauma, I could specialize in and get training to work with trauma specifically, or anything else like that, or anxiety. But for the most part, in my master's training, we kind of cover everything so that we're able to help people with any kind of issues that they have, because the whole point is that we're meeting people at wherever they are in life. So whether they're going through grief, whether they're going through a breakup, whether they're struggling with finances, whether they're struggling with anxiety, we meet them at where they are. So the training is geared towards helping people with any kind of issues and any state of mind that they're in. Of course, some things are a bit more specialized, like dealing with people that might have severe diagnoses, that would require people who have special training and extra training in certain areas. So, but for the most part, yes, when you graduate with your master's or your degree, you can help people with all kinds of issues.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Is there an area within mental health that you enjoy the most, or any condition that you're more interested in?
At the moment, I would say I'm quite intrigued by anxiety and trauma. I'm currently reading The Body Keeps Score, which is, I think a lot of people kind of know that book by now. It's speaks about the impacts of trauma, and things like that. And I've also read the book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, which also speaks about childhood trauma a lot. So I think I'm very interested in helping people and specializing in trauma, especially really severe, deep-seated trauma. So that's something that I look forward to getting like extra training in, and being a bit more specialized in that area, I think is quite fascinating. And anxiety, I'm interested in helping people with anxiety a lot, because I think it's become so common that it's almost become normalized that, it's okay to just be constantly anxious about things. And a part of me is very passionate about it, because I'm not somebody who struggles or suffers with anxiety, and I can't imagine how hard it is to constantly be overthinking and worrying about everything. And I want people to be in a place where they're not constantly worrying and stressing about everything, big and small. So that's where my passion to help people with anxiety also comes from, because, you know, just being free and not having a lot on your mind is a very good place to be, and it helps people to function in a more optimal way. So definitely anxiety and trauma. Yeah.
Yes, I think those are like some of the most common conditions that a lot of people struggle with. And actually, that goes undiagnosed or unrecognized because they may not know what those symptoms are. They might just think, oh, it's just part of my life. I'm struggling today. So yeah, that's definitely something that is very common. And I think it's probably common as well amongst our Black community. So, how would you define self-care? What would you say the definition of self-care is?
For me, I think the way I would define self-care is doing something for yourself that helps you to be at your best self and to be in a place that makes you happy. And also then in that way, it impacts others around you positively. But the most important thing is that it impacts you positively. So whatever it is that's puts you in a place where you're at your best mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically, any kind of way, whatever it is that thing is, that helps you to be at your best. I think that's what self-care is, engaging in those healthy behaviors. Sorry, Bella, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's so good to hear different definitions, because I don't think there's this one definition because it's such a big area to understand. And what are your views on where some Black people in our community struggle understanding self-care and don't perhaps always put themselves first?
I think it's quite similar to what Sabrina said, in terms of just the way that our community prioritizes the whole, everybody, and it's very much about being a collectivist society, and the group comes before the individual. And growing up, it's always, you know, looking after this person. Even as a child, maybe you might be looking after your siblings. And as an adult, you're looking after your parents and you're looking after your aunties and uncles. It's just kind of passed on, and you get used to then just putting other people first. And then that goes into other areas of your life where when you're at work, you take on everyone else's load. You do the extra work that other people don't want to do. You pick up the pieces that nobody else wants to deal with. And you kind of just, it spills into every area of your life and you get used to doing that. So I think within our community, that's very much normalized. And that's why we struggle with it. So the idea of like, no, I'm more important, or I come first, is very foreign to a lot of us. And it's very odd and sometimes very difficult to accept that actually it's okay for me to just think about myself and to just prioritize myself. And usually I think when we try to, a lot of guilt comes with it sometimes. Like, what will they do without me? What will they do if I'm not there? What will they do if I don't come through for them? And if I do this, I'm going to let them down. But then it comes at the cost of our mental health. It comes at the cost of our freedom, our peace of mind, because we're constantly thinking about other people and ignoring like our body. Like Sabrina was saying, we're not listening to our bodies. We're not even thinking about how we feel. We're not even acknowledging how we feel because we're more concerned about how other people are feeling and how they're going to feel if we don't do something, if we do this, if we do that. So I think a lot of that is ingrained within our society from childhood. It's kind of like put other people first, do this for this person and do this for that person. I think that's why we struggle with self-care a lot. It's very foreign and it's very uncomfortable when we try to then actually put it into practice because it's something that we're not used to. And I think sometimes we also sometimes can get shunned or put to shame for trying to put ourselves first. Like, oh, you're so selfish for ignoring the needs of your mom and dad or your grandparents, or you're not doing this for this family member. And it's like you're made to feel bad if you do try to prioritize yourself. So then you go back to being, okay, I'll be the family caregiver or caretaker for everybody because that's what's expected of me. So I think there's definitely a mixture of things, but it's definitely a societal mindset and things that have been passed on from generation to generation.
Thank you so much for that insight. How do we overcome that challenge when we hear self-care means selfish? You're being selfish. So how do you think in our community we could overcome those type of stigmas that we hear?
I think it begins with awareness and just understanding what self-care is, because people often criticize what they don't understand. It's very easy to criticize something that's new, different, odd. So just by understanding what self-care is, I think will help, and having that conversation with people. So, for example, a mother who's got 3 kids and never has time to herself, someone might look and think, she's an amazing mom because she's always there for her kids. And the moment she wants to spend an evening to herself, even just watching Netflix with wine or something, it's like, well, shouldn't you be doing this and that with your kids? But understanding that by her doing that, she's actually fueling herself up to be a better mother and to be a better person overall is actually good for her. If people understand that and see that, okay, her engaging in a relaxing evening for herself, by herself, is going to help her anxiety, it's going to reduce her stress, it's going to clear her mind, and understanding that simple act of just kindness for herself is not selfishness and is actually more helpful in the long run. And she's not going to be burnt out from just constantly running around for the kids. If people understand something about self-care in that context, then it will help them to see that actually self-care is not selfish. It's actually not just for the individual, but it can be for the people who are around that individual as well. So I think talking about it and understanding what self-care is, because I think some people have like the perception that it is selfish because it's all about you, but it's not all about you actually, because when we're in a good place, we can benefit everyone around us just because we're actually at our best. So I think one way to overcome it is definitely to talk about it and to understand what it is. So having a workshop like this where we're raising awareness about self-care helps people to just have a better understanding of what it actually is and what it looks like. And it's also just having an open mind to understanding it and actually exploring it, and then
Yes.
eventually engaging in it.
Yes, most definitely. Thank you for that. Because I think together as a community like this, we can overcome those stigmas by talking about it and confronting some of those really difficult questions that have been generated maybe from generational trauma, and that cycle's gone on and on, that we are able to break those cycles. So we want to know, what do you do for your self-care? Because you're studying a master's, you're about to embark a great career. Tell us, what is your favorite self-care activity?
Ooh, there's quite a lot, but I think some of my top favorite ones is reading, exercising, and cooking when I actually want to. But yeah, I do enjoy a lot of things, but I think reading is definitely one that I love. I just don't have that much time for it right now, but it's something I do enjoy a lot. Um, Exercising, so whether that's in the gym or going for a walk or going for a run, or even just like following a YouTube tutorial. I love exercising. I love working out, and cooking and baking. I love just cooking, learning new recipes, trying new recipes. It can be quite therapeutic. So those are some of my favorite self-care activities.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So I'm going to give you a magical gift. It's only for tonight. It will expire in 12 hours. That I give you an extra hour of self-care. What would you do for that extra hour?
I would read my favorite novel while listening to like one of my chill playlists on Spotify. And because it's winter, if it was summer, I would go in the garden and sit under the sun. But because it's winter, I'll have like a blanket with me and a cup of tea or a glass of wine, depending on how I'm feeling. And that I would read that book. That hour would go so quick for me because I can't get enough of like my favorite books. But yeah, with that extra hour, that's what I would do for my self-care.
Oh, that is so great. And I'm gonna add Sabrina to the same question, because if you get a magical gift, we've got to give it to the other panelists as well. So I'll offer the same gift to Sabrina. So Sabrina, if you had an extra hour a day, what would you do for self-care?
Well, mine's not as exciting as C's. Mine will literally just be sleep. I would sleep and rest because I've learned to realize that that rest is a way of recuperating my body physically from aches and pains, but your mind kind of, with enough rest, I can deal with any challenges that come forward. So that will actually just sleep. A nice comfortable bed that's surrounded, you know, all the cushions and all cozy. But yeah, mine is just sleep for the extra hour. But that might not happen now. The clock's changed, didn't they? So I think I've lost that one. But
Yeah,
sleep.
I love it. I love it. So over to the audience. I am also sharing this magical gift with you. So let's get active in the chat. Tell us, if you are gifted with an extra hour, what would you do for self-care? So in the chat, drop what would you do for self-care? I mean, I'll even add my one, what I would do for self-care. So guys, in the chat, or if you're listening via YouTube, drop in the chat, what would you do for an extra self-care? Even our event moderators will add to the chat. So yeah, tell us, what would you do for that extra? You've only got it for 12 hours, so use it wisely. What would you do for that extra hour? I think many of us would actually just sleep. Oh, sauna and steam. I love that. I mean, I don't know if an hour's enough. It'll have to be a 2 hour or one of those lovely sauna and steams that you have half a day. So we love that. Sauna and swim, steam. Anything else? Drop in the chat. We've got swimming. Our event moderators draw. Oh, yes. Escape yourself into a different world. We've got go for a long walk and get a facial. Absolutely. Walk with the facial on. God damn it. Do you know what I mean? You know, enjoy it. What else do we have for that extra hour? Go for a walk while listening to music. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Anybody else in the chat? I'd love to hear. What would you do for that extra hour? Wonderful. Great, great. Keep them coming. So guys, use this for your self-care card as well. You know, add that to your self-care card, because when we send it to you, you can keep it on your phone, you can print it out, put it on your fridge, wherever you want to display as a reminder, because I think often when we're living our really busy day-to-day lives, we forget, like, what do we like, what really brings us enjoyment. So our moderator has just dropped that in the chat. So guys, grab your self-care card. Wonderful, wonderful. So for the last segment of Black Self-Care, we're going to have a discussion. We're going to take questions from the audience for our panelists. So before we do that, we want to check in with you, make sure everybody is doing okay. So we're going to do part 2 of our well-being questionnaire. So I'll get our event moderator to add the last poll for you to do a last check-in, so we can check we're all on the great vibration. So it's just appeared on your screen. So if you'd like to take a few moments to write what your well-being, how you're feeling right now. That would be amazing. So this is very much confidential. It's for us to do a check-in to see. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So guys, this part of Black Self-Care is called our Q&A session with the panelist. So we do have a few questions that have come in from Eventbrite. So our event host, Serena, will take over this section. So the first question to the panel is, how do we manage negative talk? What can we do for our self-care for negative self-talk? And I'll leave you in the hands of Sabrina. So start thinking about your questions. Serena will unmute you so that you can ask your questions to the panelists. So the first question is, how to manage negative self-talk?
Hi everyone. You should be able to raise your hand or at least let me know in the chat if you want to ask a question. In the meantime, if we ask Sabrina, what are your thoughts on how to manage negative self-talk?
I think that one is going to be an ongoing process about how to manage it. For me, is kind of making sure that the talk that I say to myself is positive. I'm someone that believes that words have power. My students tell me off for it all the time, that I believe how we talk about ourselves then affects how other people talk about us. So I feel like it's just to remind yourself of what you bring to the table, what you can achieve, and your limitations. That kind of, to me, will reduce negative self-talk, and knowing that it's a daily and sometimes an hourly process of trying to change that pattern of behavior. So for me, that's how you kind of reduce it. But it's ongoing, and I don't pretend it to be easy. It's just, ongoing work is required.
And C, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think I have two options or two ways that you could work through it, coming from a very psychological perspective, and things that I usually say to clients who come with negative self-talk as an issue. So one way I kind of challenge you to think about negative self-talk is to love yourself the way you love your friends and family. So the things that you're saying to yourself, if you wouldn't say it to your friends or family when they have an issue or when they're struggling with something, don't say it to yourself, because it's easy to practice loving others, but sometimes we really neglect loving ourselves. And that also comes up in the way we speak. So if you're faced with an issue, you're struggling with something, when you are faced with that negative thought or that negative self-talk, if it's not something that you would say to a friend or family struggling with the same thing, then don't say it to yourself. If you wouldn't criticize them, don't criticize yourself. If you wouldn't insult them, don't insult yourself. And I think having that narrative in your head that if I would never say that to my mom or my best friend, why am I saying it to myself? And just practice that. It's very difficult, but it's meant to be something that you practice. And it's not an overnight thing. It's not, like Sabrina said, it's going to be continuous. So that's one way I would say combat negative self-talk. The other way would be to challenge that negative thought, have a conversation with that negative thought. So that negative thought comes, or if it's something like let's say you didn't get a job that you really wanted, and you know you were good for that job, you had all the qualifications, everything, and you start telling yourself, you know what, I'm really bad at this and I'll never amount to anything in life, or something like that. Challenge that thought and question it. Is it true? Is there evidence for that? Is not getting one job, does that mean I'm not good at what I do? No, I've been doing this job for 10 years. Just because I didn't get this one job doesn't mean that I'm not good at what I do. So have a talk, challenge that negative thought, have a conversation with it and challenge it. Is there evidence for it? Is it true? And what evidence supports it? Because most of the time when you actually analyze your negative self-talk, there is not much evidence for it and it's not true. And it's usually just because of one incident that you'll start feeling like everything in life about it must be true, and that's not the case. So challenge that negative thought, like pretend it's in front of you and challenge it, and then find the opposite thing to say to it, which is positive. It's like, I didn't get the job, but I know what I'm doing and I know that I'm capable and I can get another job. And I have a job right now, which means I can do this because I've got this job in the first place. So challenging that negative self-talk is another way to handle what might be going on in your head that's negative.
Yeah, thank you. I think as well what you're saying there, you know, like just using your example of not getting a job. I mean, there could be so many reasons around that. And unless you've asked for some feedback on your performance, then you won't really know what that reason is. And so you could be conjuring up things in your mind that aren't necessarily true. And, you know, people do that with everything, don't they? They sort of, you know, make a decision about why something's happened or how it happened. And sorry, my granddaughter decided to tell me. But yeah, why it's happened, and you make a decision about, you know, how terrible it is and how it affects you. And it's, you know, and so we just feed our mind with things that are not necessarily the truth. Yeah, so thanks for that. The other thing I was thinking is that sometimes as well, when something goes wrong for us, we quickly forget all the things we've done really, really well. And you know, I find this sometimes when I work with people, I have to remind them, you know, like, what have been your wins? Because so many things happen that go well. We're so used to dismissing them. Just quickly move on from them. You don't even, you know, you just don't acknowledge them. But as soon as something goes wrong, oh my goodness, this is a terrible thing. I feel so silly. I'm really embarrassed, and so on and so forth. So, you know, we don't give ourselves grace, which we really should give ourselves grace, because we're just human. We're human, and everybody makes mistakes, and people get things wrong all the time. So, you know. So my next question here is, what relaxation techniques can you share? I'll ask Sabrina.
Oh, my go-to for this year, as I said earlier, has been rain sounds. So I look forward to, it's a specific type of rain sounds. So on YouTube, the sounds of rain on the galvanized roofs, like in the Caribbean, so that Caribbean rain sound, I find that helps me to be mindful and sit in that moment and just think and breathe. And all the thoughts that I have in my mind will slowly kind of disappear. So for me, that's one of my top tips for kind of relaxation, to get yourself in that space where, because sometimes I think we worry about things that we don't need to worry about. So we need to find a way to just get them out of the head. And that's what I found is rain sounds, going for a walk, watching mindless TV that makes no sense and has me chuckling or laughing or shouting at the TV. But I find it's just doing something that allows you to be still and not focus on the world's kind of problems and worries. For me, that's my relaxation techniques. Or spas is always a go-to. Anything with a spa and a jacuzzi, that also always helps. But yeah, anything that's just reminds you to be still and just focus on the body and what it's feeling. Yeah.
And C, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have to agree with Sabrina. Anything that slows down your mind is key. But of course, it depends on what you need in that moment. So something that I think works for me is just really just taking time to just breathe, because we often don't realize either we're holding in our breath, we're not actually exhaling properly, and we're holding in a lot. So sometimes when I'm finding just being stressed or just overwhelmed and I need to relax, a lot of the time when you're stressed and overwhelmed, your breathing changes, and you don't realize now that you're by the change in your breathing, you're also affecting your heart rate. So if you actually focus on your breathing, you can slow down your heart rate, and that forces your body to actually relax. So focusing on your breathing, if you can and if you're able to, just taking deep breaths and counting your breath so that your mind isn't focused on everything else, but it's just focused on that one thing and what's happening in your body, like Sabrina said. And I think something that also helps me relax is watching just comedy, a lot of comedy, because I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not worrying about anything. I'm laughing, I'm releasing all these happy chemicals in my body, and I'm just immediately relaxed. Smiling is good for your face, it's good for your muscles. So just watching a lot of comedy, things that I find funny, just watching a lot of that, I think is just really, really nice. And I also really like to watch relaxing content on YouTube, like cozy days, cooking videos, anything that's just slow and relaxing, rather than like the busy, hectic vlogs and busy people just doing a lot. Sometimes just nice, calming videos of people doing things that are relaxing. So those are things that I think are helpful for relaxation, doing something that can either cheer you up or doing something that will intentionally relax your body.
Thank you. And one of the things that we spoke about a little bit, but is like making time for it, like, you know, like just thinking about, because there are lots of times where we're not really doing anything in particular, like it's not a focused time on relaxation or taking care of yourself. So you could easily whittle away half a day, but not consciously or actively be working on your self-care or trying to relax. So, you know, making time for things is really important. A question that is really important across mental health and well-being is sleep. And you find that people that suffer with mental health issues often don't sleep very well. What kind of things can people do to be able to, you know, enhance sleep or sleep better? Some people have issues waking up in the night, that sort of thing. So if you're not getting like your full amount of sleep, then you don't enter into the different, is it called realms of sleep? You know, you have the different, I think there's 3 stages, isn't there? But, you know, what kind of tips can we give about having restful sleep?
I think that's a difficult one. I'm still trying to deal with that, because I feel like for my condition, fatigue is part of the symptoms. So fatigue and insomnia is a constant battle back and forth. So you kind of have to figure out what works one week won't work for the next. So I think sometimes it's back to knowing your body. Sometimes it might be a day that you make sure you do enough exercise so that your body does wipe out, and then you do sleep. It could be different stuff like taking magnesium tablets or sprays and creams. They're also known to kind of help you with sleep, getting a massage, having a hot bath, drinking a nice kind of cocoa tea, and all those comfort things is what you can try to kind of help you sleep. And I think sometimes the more we think about trying to sleep, the less likely we are going to sleep. So sometimes just letting the body do what it needs to do. Those are my tips, but they're not foolproof, guys. It's literally you finding out what works for you and your body and going with it.
So we got anything to add, C?
Yeah. So for me, anyway, just talking from personal experience, because I've never had trouble sleeping until I had insomnia at the start of the year. But what worked for me, or what helped me to start sleeping well again, was addressing the things that were in my mind that I wasn't aware of that were affecting my sleep. So luckily, because of my training, I had to be in therapy. So I had my therapist help me through that time. So there was a lot going on in my life at that time. And what we talked about, at least, or what we addressed, was that all the things that were going on in my life, a lot of them I didn't have control over, but they were constantly on my mind and I was constantly thinking about them. So when I now tried to sleep, sleep wouldn't come because those things were still on my mind. And the way I can the thing I guess I can advise is that if it's something like insomnia, address the issues and the problems that you're facing, because that's the only way your mind will be able to actually rest and let go. Because I think your mind constantly thinking about those things is its way of saying, please, let's deal with this so that we can actually rest. I can't relax fully until this is sorted because this is a big problem or this is a big issue. I guess an analogy to help you understand is kind of like if you have a computer that's got like, if you're in a web browser and you've got like 10 tabs open, your computer's in overdrive. It's going to use so much energy and it's not going to be working at its best if you've got all those tabs open versus when you just have one tab open that you're using at a time. So think of your mind having all those tabs open. How can it rest? How can it relax? How can it function at its best when it's got all these tabs and all of them are refreshing, all of them are updating, all of them are constantly working? So in that way, think of your mind in the similar way. If you've got lots of things going on, take the time to address them. It doesn't have to be necessarily through therapy, but whatever it is, deal with it, face it, handle it, however that might look like. And you'll find that hopefully you'll be able to sleep again because your mind is not racing. And I find that when I have a lot on my mind, even if it's not insomnia, even when I have a lot on my mind, I don't sleep as well. And when I wake up with a very anxious feeling and I don't feel very well rested because I know that I've got a lot to do or I've had a lot to do. So yeah, I think that's just another way of looking at it. But definitely the stuff that Sabrina said as well works, like tiring out your body physically by exercising or something helps as well sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you. So another question is about grief and coping with grief and how to administer self-care while grieving. Do you have any thoughts on things that people can do to relieve some of that?
My thoughts, well, I've recently had a bereavement, so I'm still trying to figure out what the tips and tricks are to help. But what I found is sometimes we get comfort with tradition. So sometimes knowing what our customs and traditions are and going through those processes and motions help us in the grieving process. And I think is also knowing that how you grieve is not going to be the same as how somebody else's grieve. So giving yourself that grace to whatever I'm feeling today, that's good, and going through those motions. Just like when I talked earlier about grief and disability, it's something that different people have different concepts of what it is to grieve, what it looks like, what it feels like. But the one that I'm always drawn to is kind of acknowledging what's lost. So taking that time to acknowledge what you have lost, what that means to you, but what you have left. Because often in that process of grief, that person has left you something. There may be skills or qualities that you now look at yourself and you're like, oh, I got that from that person, or they left me that experience or memory. So sometimes focusing on that, what you have left, what that lost, what is left from that loss, and now what you're going to do with that information. I find sometimes it's quite, I guess it helps me heal knowing that what they've left with me, the skills they've left with me, what am I going to do to carry that torch on to the next action or the next thing, so that when I go, that I leave a similar legacy. So that's what's helped me, is kind of taking that time to figure out what works for you and what's going on. So for me, it's about what's lost, what's left, what's possible, what we're going to do next with this new information. And just know that it takes time. I think there's this perception that grief has a time period, that the period of annual leave you've got 5 days, you're going to grieve from Monday to Friday, and then after that, you're going to be fine. Grief doesn't do that. It sometimes catches you unaware, random days, random times. Just allow that space for it to happen. And for, I guess, similar to when you're planting a seed in the soil, you've got to let time for things to settle. Allow your body to do that. See your body as a plant and allow yourself to just be in that moment and do what you need to do in order to function and be well, or that new version of normal. You may not become the same version as before, but your new version. That's kind of my advice. So just give yourself a little grace, guys, a little grace. It goes a long way.
Would you like to add anything, C?
Yeah, I think grief is very complex, and it's not a one size fits all at all. And like Sabrina was saying, you do what works for you. But I think one thing some people dismiss is just allowing themselves to feel like whatever it is that you're feeling. If you're grieving, but you feel angry at having lost that person or that thing or a part of yourself, allow yourself to be angry. If you're genuinely happy about whatever it is you've lost or relieved for whatever reason, there's no shame in being happy or feeling like you're relieved that something is gone or that thing is gone for whatever reason. And if it's that you're anxious, you're not sure what it is, if you're happy, angry, sad, you're annoyed, whatever it is, allow yourself to feel that. And whatever feelings come up for you during that grief process, don't shame yourself for it. Don't feel bad for feeling whatever you're feeling, because that's also part of grieving, is allowing yourself to feel it, because there is no rule that says you must cry, you must be sad. Whatever you're feeling, allow yourself to feel it. And if it's also something practical to do, is to just express it. That could be expressing it to a friend, a family member. It could be to a therapist. It could be to a journal, a diary that no one will ever read. Something that I think is helpful sometimes is, especially if you're grieving someone or something that you can't communicate with, you can't address that person directly. Something I used to help my clients do is to ask them to write a letter to that person that they can no longer speak to or have no access to for whatever reason. Write a letter to that person or speak, so that you can say everything that you wanted to say, that you never got to say or would have wanted to say. Write a letter to that person. It doesn't have to be sent. You can keep it or you can throw it away. You can burn it. You can put it in the bin. You can shred it, but it doesn't have to go anywhere. It's just a way of releasing and venting everything, because oftentimes people think that grief has to look a certain way. If I don't cry, if I don't look sad, if I don't wear all black, that means I'm not taking my grieving seriously, or I'm not grieving in the right way. There is no right way to grieve. It comes in phases. One day you might be happy, one day you might be okay, another day you're reminded and you're back to that day when you lost that thing or that person. And it's a never-ending process. It's ongoing. So I'd say allow yourself to feel, vent and express your grief in some way, shape, or form, because keeping it inside is only going to make things feel more intense, and it's going to just get bigger and bigger, whatever that feeling is. And you might then express it in a way that's unhealthy or unhelpful if you don't express it properly. So express and vent to somebody if you need to. And yeah, allow yourself to feel. I think that's a big part of self-care. And even then, allowing yourself to just do the things that you still love and enjoy. So hobbies and activities that you enjoy, still try and make time for those. You might find that you're not really interested in doing them as much, or that maybe you might avoid some of them because they remind you of that person or that thing that you lost. So you might avoid them, and that is also a form of self-care, so that you're not constantly triggering yourself, but allow yourself time and give yourself room to do what feels right in the moment, definitely.
Thank you, C. And I like that you said person or thing, because sometimes people, when they speak about grief, they associate it just with bereavement, and it could be lots of things: a relationship breakup, the loss of a home. There are lots of reasons that people experience grief. So yeah, that's really important. So I think we've answered all the questions in the chat. So I'm grateful for your comments, Sabrina and C. And I'm going to hand back to Bella.
Thank you, Serena. And just finally, if there is anybody in the chat that might want to come on to ask a question, if you raise your hand or in the chat indicate, or we will go on to the next segment. And as I mentioned, we are streaming live on YouTube. I will get the event moderator to drop our YouTube link in the chat. So after this event, you can go back and revisit in the YouTube. So our moderator will add the YouTube to the chat. Okay. So for those in the audience who may not be aware, we have received funding for access to Black therapists. So what does that mean for you? So if you are struggling, or after this event you feel a little triggered, you can sign up for 30 minutes with one of our Black therapists. And we keep this process really simple. You just use your phone. So in the chat, the moderators will add the link where you can get access to 30 minutes with a Black therapist. You simply text our event host, Serena, or send an email. Very simple. You don't need to fill in the form, and then you'll be contacted with some dates and times. So it's fully free and fully funded. So yeah, we do recommend, if you feel triggered, to do so. Would also like to bring to your attention that we like to mix things up. So we do like to do Zoom events, and we also like to do in-person events, because everybody likes their eggs differently, let's say. So our next event is in collaboration with Greenwich Library at the Greenwich Centre, which is about 10 minutes from Cutty Sark, or it's 2 minutes from Maze Hill, and Greenwich Library is actually just 1 minute's walk from the bus station as well. So on the 14th of November, we're going to have an in-person event. And yes, refreshments are on Think Tenacity Academy. So you'll have tea and coffee throughout the day. We're going to start from about 3:30 on the 14th of November. So if you go to our Eventbrite link, you'll be able to sign up for that. So that will be amazing if you can, if you are interested in that event and you want to support us. So we rely heavily on our community spreading the word about making time for Black mental health events. So we'd like to ask you to take a moment that if you enjoyed our event, to perhaps write a review for us, because we are actually on Google. So if you go into Google, Making Time for Black Mental Health Events, you will find us. So it would really help if you could write us a review. That would be really, really amazing. You just click onto the link. The link will be shared in the chat. If you'd like to take a moment after the event to write us a review, that would be awesome. That would be really great if you could do that. And after the event, if you wanted any follow-up information about Making Time for Black Mental Health, or you want to access any of our links, we do have a link tree, which is available under our social media handles as Think Tenacity. So if you wanted to go back and grab your self-care card, it's actually the very first one. So you click on self-care and then you just fill in what's your favorite song, what's your favorite movie, and that self-care card will be sent to you, and it's as a JPEG, so you can have it on your phone or you can print it out. We also ask for donations, so if you'd like to contribute a donation so that it helps our events to be free and that we can continuously grow. On the link tree, you can also find all of our social medias available. And some of you might be aware that we've got a podcast. So we do have a podcast. And if you go to any of your favorite podcast providers, Spotify, Apple, you'll find our podcast there. Okay. And lastly, we do have our Eventbrite link. So if you want to find out about any of the other events, head over to our Eventbrite page and you'll find all of our events here. So we do ask you, please share with friends, help to get the word out. So thank you very much.
Follow us on YouTube. Search Think Tenacity. Follow us on social media by searching Think Tenacity. Follow us on YouTube. Search Think Tenacity. Follow us on social media by searching Think Tenacity. Follow.
So guys, we hope that you've enjoyed Black Self-Care. I don't know about you, but I've learned quite a few new self-care techniques that I didn't think about before, and a lot of free Black self-care tips as well. Not everything has to cost money to take care of ourselves. And I think one of the most important takeaway is self-care is not selfish. So thank you to all our participants that joined Making Time for Black Mental Health events today. We're very happy that you've joined and we hope to see you again in the future. So thank you so much to everybody who joined and everybody who participated. So thank you very much. I'd like to say a big thank you to our panelists. So over to
You're muted, Bella.
So a big thank you to our panelists, and C, thank you for joining. We'll add your Instagram and contact details in the chat. So C, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And over to Sabrina, our Think Tenacity facilitator. Thank you for sharing your story and your self-care tips. So Sabrina, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us and having this platform, Bella. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful. We will add Sabrina's contact details as well into the chat. So guys, stay safe and we hope that you'll be able to use some of these self-care tips so that you can learn new ways to look after your mental health. So thank you so much for joining and being part of Making Time for Black Mental Health Self-Care. Thank you so much. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. And head over to YouTube where you'll be able to get any time to get a replay of today's event. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, guys.
Could you stop the YouTube, Bella?
Yeah.